I'll tell you what's not right. My wife will hardly go out the door these days. She says people she's known all her life cross the other side of the street to avoid her. If it goes on much longer, I'll have to retire myself. Hi, my name is Dave Murphy and I play Sgt Tom Dwyer from the RIC. Three words for Tom Dwyer are loyal, disciplined, and I think confused a little bit. I think he's confused because he can't really understand why people are acting the way they are to him, certainly in the early parts of the scripts, because he's still just doing his job, the job that he's been doing for quite a number of years in the community. I think he's dismayed a little bit by the way in which the community is reacting to him, and I can understand that. I think it's really interesting to have a character like that in the play because you don't necessarily see that perspective all the time. So I think it's really interesting to have that in there. But I do think, yeah, he's confused about why people are acting the way they are, particularly towards him and his wife. And you know, obviously the tragic incident that happens with Sergeant Hughes, or sorry, with Corporal Hughes as well, is something that I think he struggles to understand. Theatre or film, I'm not really sure if you can divide it like that. I think they both are brilliant mediums. And I also think they require different types of acting and different types of acting skills. I think with film, it's much more about your face and it's much more about the close-up. So you tend to do a lot more, with your face. Whereas with theatre acting, it's much more about your physical, your overall physical presence and projection and making sure you can get everything out to the audience. So they're two different medium, but they're both brilliant in their own way. So my personal favourite is film. I do love film, and I'd watch far more films than I would obviously get out to the plays and theatres. But I think theatre is such an important part. There's a much more community aspect to it. It's easier to do in terms of organising theatrical groups in local communities because there's less sort of immediate cost, and it's something you can do in the moment. It doesn't require a huge amount of specialised equipment, but they both have their place. The time period for fractures, I mean, it's 100 years ago, but very little has changed. I mean, people still have these divided notions, these black and white notions, of loyalty and good and bad. And, you're on one side and I'm on the other. And if you're wearing this uniform, you represent X, and I'm wearing this uniform and I represent Y. And I think that's still very prevalent today. I mean, we see it in the States, we see it, and it's easy for demagogues, guys like Trump and Bolsonaro and Putin to grasp onto these things and try and make people feel scared and isolated. And I think that's something that's very prevalent. It was very prevalent 100 years ago when it came to the War of Independence. And it's interesting, even when you write it today. It's interesting to see how little has changed, and that's in one sense disappointing. I mean, things have changed, obviously. It's disappointing that we can't get beyond these things, these divisions. But I think that's one of the things that something like Fractured can help to highlight and help to show, is that there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot to be learned from the past, and that the best way forward is not to repeat the mistakes of the past. No, I think countries are a bit of a nonsense concept. I think borders are a bit of a nonsense concept. I do think there are, obviously differences in kind of populations in terms of people's kind of the way people act and stuff like that. But I think we've got to get above that idea of nationalism and that idea that it's us or them, because I think that's what it foists upon us ultimately, is this concept that, we have this innate difference when, we really should be striving to understand what we have in common with everyone else and not try and identify or try and define ourselves by our differences. And I think that's what this concept of dying for your country tends to kind of exaggerate, is this idea of difference. And I think difference is something we need to get beyond as a people. We've too many bigger issues in the world to be worrying about, whether I'm from this country, this county, this town, whatever it is, and you're from somewhere else. And I think that's really important. When I see an email from Down at Heel coming in, I'm delighted to sit down and read through some new scripts, because the scripts are always great. My first reaction is always to look for any lines for Tom Dwyer, my character, obviously, but I do always enjoy reading the story and see how the story is progressing. I think it's a really fascinating tale, and it's been really woven together really well. So it's always a joy to get the emails in and to keep the story going. So long may that continue.